All right, so I'm here to talk to you about the new Galera Manager that deploys Galera Cluster for MySQL and MariaDB server on DigitalOcean. This is one of two webinars. There will be a North American one later as well, but you guys are the European crowd. So I have a quick agenda today. I'm really here to talk to you about running Galera on DigitalOcean, doing it the Galera Manager way, a bit of a demo, but I also have lots of nice screen caps for you, and then what the future holds, like what's coming up. So first and foremost, Codership, are the developers and experts of Galera Cluster. We established the company in 2007. All the three founders are all engineers. In fact, the company is made up mostly of engineers. So basically, um, it's an engineering-focused organization. Follow a services business model, producing open source software. But the most interesting thing lately is we've also got something called this enterprise offerings, Galera Cluster Enterprise Edition, which I will talk to you a little bit about later as well. Well, we are used, of course, in thousands of various industries, from e-commerce to gaming, telco, banking, insurance, healthcare, media, software as a service. There are lots of SaaS platforms that offer, uh, Galera platform as a service as well as infrastructure as a service. So if you guys are familiar with OpenStack before, for example, OpenStack has always recommended that you need to use Galera Cluster. In fact, if you're familiar with Kubernetes, Kubernetes also recommends Galera Cluster for huge portions of uh, the infrastructure. So it is very useful because it's a synchronous replication sort of cluster, right? Virtually synchronous replication, which we'll talk about in the next slide. So important bits here. There are three types of replication in the MySQL world. Uh, you're probably familiar with asynchronous replication, which is the default inside of MySQL. You insert something, it's very fast. It hits the primary, and it may or may not hit the secondary. There tend to be frameworks for automatic failover, but you have to write some Perl code and Bash scripts, etc. Because automatic failover isn't built into asynchronous replication. And naturally, a secondary may or may not have received said transaction, which of course, is can be a huge problem for you overall. Yeah. So that's the asynchronous replication portion of things. There's also semi-synchronous replication, which is kind of what powers a huge chunk of the internet. That's where you insert something, then it obviously hits the primary, and then it will, at least one secondary will receive said transaction. Now this is an important portion of the slide, because it alludes to the fact that when you have these inserts, they have to write to at least one other database in your chain, and naturally this would increase the latency, right? So previously you may have been able to commit something in 10 seconds. uh, let's say it's a big transaction, but now you make, well, you'll never be 10 seconds, 10 milliseconds, and now it will be close to 120 milliseconds. And the reason is quite simple. It's because it has to do a network hop, and the network hop is costly, right? Said network hop will naturally ensure that um, that you have to, while you are ensuring it writes to another secondary, it is also adding latency, which then brings me down to the virtually synchronous Galera cluster, in where there is no concept any longer of primary and secondary. Everything is basically an equal node, because it's multi-master replication. All nodes basically contain the same data, and because uh, high availability is built into Galera, there is zero need for a framework of any sort. You don't need we don't need any frameworks to tell you, oh, hey, like, this is going to be helping you fail over. Basically, failover is built in. You create 3 nodes. If one node goes away, the other 2 are still alive. In fact, in the chat, I'd love to hear if you are using DigitalOcean in production or you're considering using DigitalOcean in production. It would be very useful for me. You can see the little chat icon just to let me know I use DigitalOcean or I'm considering DigitalOcean. So, what is Galera Cluster really? It's basically replication where you can read and write to any node uh, because all the nodes are equal, as I said, right? In some instances, of course, you will not want to read and write from any node. You may only want to write to a node. And this is where a load balancer comes into play to some extent, but it really depends on the workload. We also, of course, have automatic node provisioning. This means that once the first node is set up, basically set up to run as a bootstrap, the other nodes can automatically discover if it's as long as it's pointed to one of the nodes. So while this is really bad configuration ideology, you can actually have just a new node pointing to one of the nodes. But I don't recommend that. You should always have your my.cnf to be standardized. Each node, of course, has identical data, and the replication is virtually synchronous. And what it means by virtually synchronous is it doesn't write to each and every node at any given time. It actually sends it does a certification. And once the certification passes, so even before the data is written, as long as the transaction is certified, the client gets the okay. So this actually makes things a little faster. So that's why it's virtually synchronous and not synchronous. But now that you're here, of course, the natural thing for me to do is tell you the trade-off is, of course, you've now gone from 10 milliseconds to 120 milliseconds to now potentially about 150 milliseconds because it writes to extra nodes. And of course, Galera nodes need to be equal, so it performs as best as your worst node naturally. So Galera is fully all about multi-master, right? We have virtually synchronous replication. It's extremely highly available with zero data loss, and it's consistent data across all nodes. There's no single point of failure here. The only chance of getting a failure in a 3-node minimum is the fact that you have lost 2 nodes, and then the cluster will stop operating at that point in time. It uses quorum-based failure handling, which really means that when you have 3 nodes, you have 100% of a quorum. If you lose 1 node, you still have 66.7% of a quorum, 2/3 of 100. But if you lose 2 nodes, of course, this is much worse. And then naturally, I should tell you that if you only set up a 2-node cluster, if 1 node goes down, 50% doesn't make a majority in a quorum. That's actually why we always recommend you to do 3 nodes. You can, however, set up 2-node clusters. We don't recommend it. Of course, we use optimistic concurrency control, and I alluded to how that works a little earlier as to why you actually benefit from the certification. And we are, of course, fully 100% multi-master cluster, right? All nodes are equal in terms of having the data. So you never have these lagging secondaries. Everything is available 24/7. And this is a core feature of the product by design because it has automatic transaction conflict detection and management. And basically, your app can issue transactions to any node and it should just work. And of course, it's parallel replication as well, so that there are parallel applies on the secondary threads. And there's 0 frameworks required for failover, right? You don't need to designate a single node for write and the rest for reads. The configuration is actually extremely simple. But of course, it may be too simple for many instances. That's why you need to have a better configuration in a production environment. Galera is of course fully optimized for the WAN and the cloud. Packets are only exchanged over network transaction commit time. So in DigitalOcean you have many regions, right? You can have Singapore, San Francisco, and if you had a multi-region cluster, it will not send everything across all. It will only send it across to not all 9 nodes. Only send it across to one elected node on the it will only send it across to one elected node basically on the remote data centers. So you can have up to 3 data centers, and then you have extremely highly available cluster. And of course, it's topology aware application. So we only send it to the data center once. And when we do this via what is known as segments. So if you look very carefully in your Galera cluster configuration, later on, even when we set it up in the GUI, you will see that there is this option for segments. And of course, we're only going to set up one with segment 0. But you can set up segment 1 and segment 2 as well. So you have a 9-node Galera cluster. Of course, we detect and automatically evict unreliable nodes. So if you have flappy network or node failure, if it keeps on getting disconnected, there is no chance that it will actually rejoin automatically. So you need, as a database administrator, need to go in and do some manual intervention right there. So it's actually not too hard for you to do. If you somehow configure it for split brain acceptance, we of course by default have split brain recovery management of split brain. So there's no such thing as two separate Galeras. A well configured Galera, if for whatever reason cannot reach a quorum, will actually basically stop Galera replication. So it's better to save the data and ensure that there's good high availability rather than letting it write garbage data, because there's no way for it to merge the data later in MySQL. And then of course, we also have traffic encryption. It's key in the cloud. We have SSL set up. It is not turned on by default, but you can of course turn on SSL very easily. So this is key when you're using the cloud like DigitalOcean. So pro tip, replication traffic, regular asynchronous, all Galera replication actually happens in plain text. And because it happens in plain text, it is highly recommended you turn on SSL, because anyone can be snooping and actually reading everything, including passwords. Pretty sure you don't want that. So why you want to run Galera in a DigitalOcean Droplet? I think it's actually extremely simple, right? Because for one, you can't deploy Galera cluster on DigitalOcean. And for regular MySQL, you really want to be more configurable in a Droplet, because the base OS is just Linux. You can tune Linux, you can tune Galera, you can tune MySQL. And DigitalOcean, stick around. You actually might find that doing it the Galera Manager way is actually cheaper than using a managed cluster from DigitalOcean. So basically, if you run it in a Droplet, you are going to manage the Galera Manager plus the 3-node Galera cluster. Galera Manager will help you manage it. Galera Manager has over 600 metrics, for example, that can help you manage your production cluster, can help you set up the cluster. So, to set up your Galera cluster in Droplet, you just need to set up GMD, Galera Manager, and then it'll actually do the setup for you. You basically run everything inside Droplets. When you run Galera DigitalOcean is basically when you feel the need for virtually synchronous replication, automatic node management. Why do you run Galera Cluster in DigitalOcean? Obviously it's for the features. You want a highly available database, right? And how do you run it? I'm going to actually show you how you do it. It's actually not necessarily rocket science here, so it should be quite simple. So when you're setting up, remember you got to set up the firewall. This is typically opening up SSH for login, and then TCP for MySQL is 3306, and then 330609 is for clone SST. Specifically only if you have MySQL 8 from Codeship. If you have that, you're going to get the best SST method available, which is clone SST. And then, of course, we've got the TCP ports to open up and the UDP ports to open up for Galera cluster communications. Now, just to be very clear, you don't have to do any of this if you do Galera Manager because it'll handle it all for you automatically. Also, when you set up a Galera cluster, SELinux is a bit of a problem on the Red Hat systems. AppArmor is equivalent bit of a problem on the Ubuntu systems. So again, you gotta obviously set SELinux out properly, and then you've also got to set the firewall properly. Firewall CMD or IP tables is how you'd actually end up doing it when you're dealing with Linux in general. The good news, again, as I said, Galera Manager will handle all of this for you. So let's do it. Let's do it in a simple fashion, right? Galera Manager, I would say today is a free graphical user interface for provisioning Galera clusters on Amazon, EC2, and or DigitalOcean. You can create clusters, you can segment nodes, add or remove nodes. You can also create it on existing hardware you have. So if you created your own droplets already, Galera Manager can deploy onto those droplets, for example, or your own hardware. And if you also happen to have already existing running and you just want monitoring from Galera Manager, you can also do that. So Galera Manager is both a deployment and a monitoring solution. And of course, you can add remove nodes. It's fully web-based in browser to administer and monitor your cluster. It comes as part of Galera Cluster Enterprise Edition, and we've got wide support, right? So we can do MySQL 5780 as well as MariaDB Server 10.3 to 10.6. And we support Ubuntu's 18.04, 20.04, Debian 10.11, and Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8. Of course, we also support the 7, which is primarily what I'm going to use for most of this demo. So this is actually what it looks like. But since we are already here, why don't I just jump in and show you? If I launch this, I'm going to create a droplet. And bear with DigitalOcean as it happens. So I'm going to have a Santo S6. Pay attention that I'm going to use a fairly small node. It's just got 1 gigabyte CPU, 25 gigabyte SSD. Now remember, there can be lots of logs generated. So typically 1 month of a 3-node cluster may be 100 gigabytes of disk space. So that might be worth noting in terms of your plans when it comes to expansion. So I'm going to use I'm just going to use an RSA key here, and I'm going to create a host called GMD, and I'm going to create the droplet. So I'm going to get a freshly created droplet for me right here, and it should be done fairly soon. We'll switch back to the slides while the droplet while stuff is being installed. So just as a heads up to all of you, today we will ask the demo gods to be kind to us because we actually just got a push of the software approximately and maybe 2 hours ago for a last minute fix, a minor fix that needed to be done. So demo gods hopefully will be kind to us. So here we've got the GMD loading up. So it's going to be a brand new instance of DigitalOcean. I don't control how fast DigitalOcean works, so let me SH into that. Make that a little larger so you can see what I type. It's happening. All right. So I should be able to log on to GMD now. First thing I'll do is install Droplet again. It actually says another copy is running. It needs to keep the process. That's because DigitalOcean is still setting it up as we go along. And then officially, you need to go to the Galera Manager website here. It tells you how to download it. You got to fill up some information. So if we go down here to download, evaluate Galera Manager, you actually have to fill up some information right here. And then before you get a nice little link, right? So if I click the submit, it's probably going to help download GM installer for me now. But I don't need that because I've got the URL. So I managed to pull down the GM installer. I'm going to chmod it, and then I'm just going to run it. So if I just do this and type version, for example, it tells you I've got version 1.8, and then it gives me some options of what I can do. I'm going to hit the install button. There is a license agreement. I'm sure none of you read license agreements, so I'm just going to hit accept. So I've got a username password combo, and I obviously should copy the IP address. And that's literally what's happening now. It's going to execute a yum install. So this is going to take some time. So let's go back to this. So very soon you'll be able to see the same things that you see in this slide. Is one is you can deploy a fully managed cluster. It's either for AWS or EC2. It does everything for you. It's a managed, as you can see, a managed node and a managed host. You can also deploy clusters on a user-provided host where this is not just a managed node, but it doesn't actually do any deployments for you because you've already deployed it. So this could be your own hardware in your data center. It can also be actually a droplet if you wanted to. Then there's also the option of monitoring the existing cluster, which is, as I said, just bare basic. It just does 600 over charts. You can just choose what you want, but it doesn't do any node management or host management. So what does it mean to be a node management or host management? Node is the Galera cluster node, MySQL, and the host is of course the base OS, which is Linux, right? So that's what it really means. So the first option allows you to manage both MySQL, Galera cluster, as well as Linux. Second option, only MySQL Galera cluster. Linux you manage yourself. Third option, it only monitors the node and the host, but no more. So you can actually still get Linux statistics as well because it actually makes use of SSH to get to your hosts. So, we're obviously going to pick a cluster type and so forth. We're going to pick max database size, etc. And then once you've actually already entered your API key, which I'm going to show you how to generate, you can actually choose instances that are available to you. And we also include things like the price. So you actually know what you're getting yourself into in terms of payment and so forth. And then this is a general screen of what it should look like. See if so we're still actually executing yum update. So it really does take some time because you have to update the entire yum and then before the full repositories and so forth. So this is the important part here where we actually have an API key. So there's a question about what about add tables and do mass load data with the manager. So great question. To add tables or do a mass load, let's take this two questions. You want to load data, you don't load it into the manager. After you've created the cluster, 3-node cluster, you actually will SSH into the instance and then load the data from there. There's no GUI to load the data from there. And then to add tables, again, once you've SSH'd, you'll open up the MySQL client. Again, there's no actual GUI for this. It is basically you accessing it via the console and the command line. I hope that answers your question, Heiko. So the purpose of this is to manage a cluster, to deploy a cluster. But it's not there to help you load data or do SQL queries. There are plans to add a SSH interface to the web browser itself, but this is not a replacement for something like PHP or Heidi SQL or a MySQL workbench. You are still expected to use all those tools if that's how you feel like you want to interact with your data. This is a DBA tool for DBAs, not for developers. All right, glad to have answered the question. Okay. So now, once you've entered all of this, make sure you get the access token. I'm going to show you how to get your access token as well, because I think that's quite important. And then, you've got to enter an SSH key. The reason, again, if you don't enter the SSH key, you will find that you are unable to log onto your cluster. Now, certainly that is a subpar experience for you if you cannot log onto your cluster, so you must enter the SSH key. Then you'll see this little message that says finish, and then you should be able to launch a cluster right after. So these are examples of what Galera Manager looks like, and now we are now at the stage of installing Nginx. So you will notice that we do make use of InfluxDB. We do make use of Nginx. So there are a lot of things we do make use of to make your life simpler. Another common question I get is, can we install Galera Manager on inside of existing host? The answer is no. You need Galera Manager on its own separate host. But you will notice I used the smallest available host. It costs $6 a month, so it's extremely cheap. And I've only given it 25 gigabytes storage. You can, of course, increase it. As I told you, 25 gigs will last approximately 1 week's worth of logs. You probably want more than 1 week's worth of logs. So magic! Look, we have now created a lovely cluster. So now I'm going to visit this URL, and as it loads, let me just X that. Type the admin password, and yeah, look at that. So before we get back to the slides, I'm gonna actually now run through creating say cluster. So we are, since this is the DigitalOcean webinar, let me deploy a fully managed cluster. I'm gonna call it Galera. I'd like to use MySQL 8. I want a small database size. I know we have 25 gigabytes of space, but I want to go for 5 gigabytes. I'm going to add SSH key, just as you can see why I have a second terminal available. So it'll actually tell you, you've got an SSH key there. So I can also add another one. I can just keep on adding SSH keys. It'll add its own SSH key as well, by the way, because it needs to control the nodes. So here, you obviously got the choice of EC2 or DigitalOcean. I want DigitalOcean. And you're probably wondering, how do I get this access token? So I'm going to hop on over to the API. I'm just going to generate a new token. I call it Galera. And I'm actually going to give it 30-day expiry. You can actually change this to no expiry as well. Hit the generate token button. And just need to click this copy and hop on over back to Galera Manager. So if you look very carefully, there's no region information, no droplet size information. But now if I paste this access token, it's actually attempting to connect to DigitalOcean programmatically. And now magically, I have the ability to see what regions are available for me. I am going to pick Singapore. It's a convenient region. I'm going to pick a droplet size. Again, you can choose what kind of droplet sizes you want. For the demo, let's go with 1 CPU, 2 gigs of RAM, 50 gigs of disk, $12 a month. And I'm going to go for CentOS 7 because CentOS 7 is a good choice. DigitalOcean, as you can see, Red Hat 8 is not supported by cloud provider, but Red Hat 8 is supported by cloud provider on AWS EC2. So we obviously vary this. So now I'm just going to hit the create button, and it's actually going out there to create a little cluster for me. Create the cluster configuration for me. It's not going to create a cluster just yet. And whoa, cluster has been successfully created. Right now, I just need to click the Add Nodes button. I want to deploy, of course, 3 nodes. I'm going to call it Galera. Obviously, we're going to keep CentOS 7. Remember, I mentioned the segments in Singapore. I'm going to be segment 0. I could be segment 1 in San Francisco, segment 2 in London. Of course, we're going to keep a DigitalOcean, Singapore, and the configuration. And literally, you'll see now that it's got 3 keys because the third key is the Galera key inherited from a cluster. So Galera also has a key available for you. So now I'm just going to click the deploy button, and you can see the deployment has started. It's going to actually create nodes that have similar names, and you can always click to show logs of what's happening. So this is a real bonus. Now again, I'm going to tell you that all of this was DigitalOcean had some API token changes that happened fairly recently, so we had to make it support the new API tokens. So yeah, we've got some deployments that have just spun up. So another note is that DigitalOcean actually limits how many droplets you can create by default. So make sure you contact them to say you need to go above the 40 deployments if you are already exceeding it as a developer. So yeah, deployment has started. Let's leave this window here while we go back to the slides. So of course you can see that there's the ability here for you to monitor. In this case, I'm monitoring CPU load. This is what the logs tend to look like, basically telling you it's installing stuff and what the progress is like. It is all fairly important stuff, obviously. And then if there are any unused hosts or deployment errors, you'll actually see here and see it on the left hand side. You can delete those as well. Of course, here I've got the WSRep replicated, which is to tell you how right set replication is doing in terms of performance. And then here we've got another one that's showing you what's been received. This is also again part of the entire cluster. What's replicated. If you ever see something like flow control paused, this is basically when you do show slave status for regular replication. This is seconds behind master. This is when you can't handle when the replication is too busy. Galera starts pausing the flow control. So you really don't want to see that basically. But it's a very important thing to monitor, obviously. Uh, so this is another one where I've actually now started throwing load at it, right? As you can see, Galera Manager will, if I want to look at the whole thing, I can look at the cluster-wide view of things, or I can look at a node-level view of things. And here I've got the cluster-wide view of CPU load on different things, and then I've also got the received queue because I've been entering load on one machine, so it'll actually tell you what the received queue looks like, and the replicated queue looks like, and the local commits, which is something else you might want to look at to see again commit data from and where it's coming from. So this is again extremely useful. And you'll notice that I added WSRep local commits. It didn't exist there before. So okay, let's see if we actually have any progress, because here we've got create database cluster on DigitalOcean. So things are moving along. As you can see, we're actually doing IP tables configuration. So this is what install looks like. Let's hope the IP tables configuration, for example, just works magically, and soon we will have a cluster that we can SSH into. So basically, it's all just happening as we speak in the background. Again, we will hope to the demo gods that everything works really well. If for some reason it doesn't work, don't worry, we'll redo this properly uh, when we have extensive QA before demo, and ensure that you also are able to see it in a recording. So this is what DigitalOcean offers. They've got this database cluster, which tells you can have point-in-time recovery, etc. So when we go do the math, we've got a $30 a month machine, it's 2 gigs of RAM, 25 gigs SSD. You'll notice that this is exactly the configuration I used, which cost us $12 a month, right? And we had 2 standby nodes, which is $60 a month. So a total cost of $90 a month, which is not expensive, but maybe not so cheap either. So just so for comparison's sake, we launched GMD with a $6 a month instance, and then we launched 3 nodes with a $12 a month instance. So this is reasonably good comparison, right? So that's 12, 24, 36 plus 6 is $42. So not the hugest sum. So basically, you're looking at 114% cheaper Galera cluster setup with the benefit of virtually synchronous replication rather than asynchronous replication. So you're getting all the nodes being equal, you're getting highly available data, no need of a load balancer in front, and you're literally only paying $42. And at most, if you wanted to be completely apples to apples, even having the Galera Manager on the same kind of host, it only goes up to $48. So the reality here is we can deploy on DigitalOcean cheaper than DigitalOcean can deploy an asynchronous cluster that may suffer from secondary lag. We, on the other hand, will never suffer from secondary lag because there's no such thing as secondary lag. All the nodes are equal. Let me hop back on again to this. So it's still at the stage of installing MySQL, so it is taking a little bit of time. But at least there is success. That's the important thing, right? So there is some installation going on. Just bear with Galera Manager as it does it. MySQL is extremely large, by the way. It's in the 800 megabyte size, give or take. So you know, definitely very very huge. So yeah, so that's basically basically cost savings, which is humongous. So, why don't I delve into what is the Enterprise Edition? It comes with this Galera Manager, which obviously we will support for you. It comes with an online schema upgrade, which is this non-blocking operations. Today we have two ways to do it: total order isolation or rolling schema upgrade, and preferably we like the rolling schema upgrade because you upgrade on a per node basis. But the non-blocking operations allows you to do alter tables without blocking the rest of the cluster, which is extremely useful if you're running, say, 20 WordPress instances on one Galera cluster, and when WordPress comes out with an update, you don't want to lock the entire cluster when you're doing one database update, right? So this is extremely cool. And this cluster-wide XA transaction support. A lot of people probably realize that Galera for the longest time did not do XA transactions, but magically now of course it does. So if you have Java applications requiring this two-phase commit XA transaction, you can do it with the ability to encrypt your Gcache. So previously in MySQL, we have always had the ability to give you encrypted var-lib MySQL. Unfortunately, you can't do the var-lib MySQL Gcache encryption. And if you actually run strings to Gcache or grep it, you can actually find things inside the Gcache. So we can also encrypt the Gcache. And then we also throw in this thing called a GLB, Galera Load Balancer, which is very performant, scalable load balancer that is, you know, that is better than HA proxy, but it's not a full-on SQL proxy. So it's a level 4 proxy basically. So I'm noticing there are a couple of questions coming in. So let me answer them. Is there performance enhancement if we use MariaDB or MySQL Enterprise version? Uh, well, I can't say there's a performance enhancement, so to speak. MariaDB has its own set of performance uh, capabilities, and MySQL, we don't use MySQL Enterprise. You use Galera Cluster Enterprise Edition, and it has its own set of performance. So you're really comparing the MySQL versus MariaDB situation, and I can't give you a fair comparison because MariaDB has different features, a lot more features than maybe MySQL in some respects. Like you want to migrate your Oracle over, so I can't tell you that one performs better than the other. There are benchmarks that the vendors do perform, so you can actually use it. But I can tell you from a Galera feature standpoint, MariaDB Enterprise and the Galera Cluster Enterprise Edition is matched. I mean, all this came out in MariaDB Enterprise first, and then we brought it out to you in Galera Cluster Enterprise as well. So I'm probably not going to mention things about performance between MySQL and MariaDB because if you ask a MySQL person, they'll say it's faster. If you ask a MariaDB person, they'll say it's faster. I'm just gonna tell you there are different features. They're definitely two different optimizers. So if you run a DBT3, for example, you'll get two different sets of results. So I hope that kind of answers your question without maybe fully answering it as well, unfortunately. Um, and that's being politically correct. Yeah, and then please talk about burst load. Please talk about burst load to handling. I'm sorry, I don't understand what you mean by this burst load. But what you mean is like you suddenly have to scale up, is it? If you suddenly have to scale up, we don't automatically scale your instances up with Galera Manager, but you can add nodes if you like manually. But we don't auto scale or scale down. So there's no scale up or scale down. But that's a very good feature request, by the way. So scale up and scale down Galera nodes based on traffic is extremely useful. Do you provide Galera cluster automated recovery tools in case the quorum has been lost or some node has crashed? Yes, so we can actually, if a node crashes, you can actually just click the recover button or restart button, and when you click the restart, it'll actually aim to recover the node, either via an incremental state transfer or a full state snapshot transfer. When you add a node, basically, it's also the same. But remember, like we don't really care if one node goes away, like if there's a crash of some sort, because the other two nodes have the same exact copy of the data. So it's not like we're going to lose data on the one particular node. All right, so I think I already mentioned Galera load balancer. Yeah, we're actually basically towards the end of the slides. Actually, we're towards the end of this talk, and oh, thankfully everything everything is finished. So that took some time, and it does take time. And again, I can't make DigitalOcean any faster, but I can now SSH from here. So if I log on, so if I do SSH, say yes. If I type MySQL, magically I've got show status like WS rep. Oops. Of course, spelling is very important. I'm trying to spell fast. All right, we have a cluster of 3. So that's actually huge bonus. You can see all the logs, obviously. Now, I think one of you had a question about what happens if a node crashes, for example. Like literally, I can reduce this to 5 minutes, and if I really wanted to, I can go up here and click this stop node, for example, or I can even click a delete node or force delete node, and then I'll have a two node cluster. So let's go, since I'm already connected to one, let me go down here and stop one node, for example. Again, it will not affect the entire performance of this Galera cluster. So I'm stopping one node, and if I run this again, I got 2. No big deal. So if I add any data here or whatever, it'll sync back later as well. So I can actually again, basically start said node. Deleting the nodes require a bit more work, obviously. Oh, you've got a question about cluster backups. Yeah, that's also another very good question. Cluster backups are not handled inside a Galera Manager yet. So you have to handle it manually, since now you have SSH access. So you can handle it manually. Yeah. So So unfortunately, we don't actually have a backup. But again, very good suggestion of what we should have. It's been suggested many times by many people. So we definitely want to do that as a product offering, but we don't have it as of yet. So thank you again for that suggestion, and we will endeavor to make it happen for you. So yeah, let's go back to the slides again. So you've already seen it run, and as you can see, it doesn't skip a beat. It runs just fine. You need to, of course, register to download it. As one would expect, it's not available for it's available for evaluation, but we encourage you to definitely get a subscription, right? So that's one. And what's coming next, right? I can tell you flat out, we are going to give you the ability to update your configuration post deployment. Today we don't have that ability to update the configuration post deployment. So once you've got a database configuration, so let me quickly hop on there and show you what the configuration kind of looks like. So we go here. You'll notice that we have a my.cnf, but we actually really pull everything out of mycnfd. So it's fairly basic, and we've also obviously got the logs here and so forth, and we want to obviously allow you to do in-place upgrades. So if you have 5.7, it would be great to upgrade to 8.0, right? You want to do mobile layouts, also do an SSH console to a host, and at the moment we can't save and load logs and metrics, but we want you to be able to do that. So, but very, very good question about the backup thing, because that's something that is part of the roadmap, but not part of the the next roadmap. How do you treat MyISAM tables during migration? Okay, so that's a great question. By default, that Galera doesn't support MyISAM, right? So you're not encouraged to do that. But if you use MariaDB 10.6 onwards, there is actually MyISAM support. So you can always shoot questions, but I should probably point out that we do have MyISAM in MariaDB. So I'm gonna actually give you this MariaDB options in the docs, and you'll notice that we have this replicate MyISAM. It's turned off by default, so we can actually handle MyISAM replication if you're on MariaDB only. But you really should be doing it all on InnoDB. But if your question is directly related to MyISAM with regards to your user tables, as long as you don't directly add into the user table, you actually do a add user as opposed to writing directly into the MySQL users table, you are actually okay as well. So we actually trap these statements to ensure that it replicates. So your MySQL table is always replicated as long as you use SQL. Backup could be backing up one droplet on DigitalOcean, and then you can make a database dump in case of disaster recovery. Yeah, absolutely. We are not opposed to you doing said backup. So I'm going to show you that here we've got this ENTUJ, XAHRP, and HN. You'll notice that these match here as a heads up. So yeah, you could actually go right here and say you'd like to also do a backup. But I don't recommend you doing only DigitalOcean backups or DigitalOcean snapshots. You're much better off using extra backup as a tool, and you can throw extra backup either via SSH in this instance, or you can use GMD, the GMD host itself to do your backups. So you can actually host stuff on GMD. So again, in that case, 25 gigs may not be supremely enough for you, but you can always, attach a volume by adding a volume and using the GMD host as your backup host as well. And that can attach to any of the servers. But having backups would be extremely useful. I fully agree. And when we're ready to do backups, when you click here on this top, it'll actually have a backup option. So that's also something that would definitely come along the line. So these are all extremely good questions as a heads up. So yeah, so you can also add nodes. Obviously, like this is an extremely simple GUI to use. You can and actually I want to say that if you delete a node, it doesn't allow you to just delete. You gotta actually press it, think about it for a while. If we're thinking about it, not thinking about it, so it doesn't actually do the delete until you've actually thought about it fully. So that's another added bonus. And then of course, remember I showed you that we could add charts as well. So which chart did I add just now to show you? I said that you maybe want the local commits, right? So you can just search here for local commits, and you can just add a chart. And here's the added bonus, right? Like I can add a chart just for this machine, and it doesn't show up cluster wide. So I could just maybe I just want to monitor it individually, but I can also want to monitor things in a cluster wide fashion. So then you add it in the cluster up here. And then of course, I can add another segment, right? I can, DigitalOcean has the ability to run in multiple data centers. So I can add multiple segments. So I don't actually have to worry about only keeping these segments in Singapore, for example. I could have other segments. So yeah, this is I'd say kudos. We managed to launch, have a good cluster with the good logs. Configuration worked. I SSH only to one machine, but again, it is going to work if I SSH to another machine as well, as long as my authorized keys are there. So click yes, and I type MySQL, and I can do show databases, and we've got already got stuff here, and I presume you're all familiar with Galera Cluster as well, but then you know that if I write to one node, it'll be available in another node, right? So let me really quickly go find something interesting that I could maybe use. So I could actually just do this. So let's go here. Also go here actually. So so we're on two different hosts, as you can see, right?
And if I just do create database EMEA, use EMEA, and if I do that, and then I do a little bit of an insert here, and then I do that select count from customers. So if I go here and do show databases, oh well, there is EMEA, use EMEA, select, just paste it. Look, so the data replicated without issue. And you know, magically you should now be able to see that in the WS rep received as well, as you can see here. I can actually reduce the granularity so you can actually see at what point in time I did it. So I did do some data entry, and you notice that where's the local commits? There we go. We hit it on one node, the last node. Remember, that's how I got the local commits. What is the best practice in case of multi-regional deployment when Galera cluster nodes are distant from each other? Any limitations related to latencies between regions? So best practice, run it in the same, like DigitalOcean or AWS. So I've got a good example here where I've got lots of nodes here. 9-node Galera cluster has been set up, and let me log on to SF, for example. So you've actually seen that it took 0.36 seconds to write to 3 nodes, right? 0.33 seconds to write to 3 nodes. 0.18 seconds as it's warmed up. Let's log on via SSH to an existing cluster that probably has a similar data set for what it's worth. So I'm going to again just do this copy. So let's type MySQL. This one's got a password. Show databases. Use EMEA. Show tables. All right. So here's an example of it inserting into 9-node cluster. It took 3 seconds versus 0.18, but that's because it's warm. Let's do that again. 1.76. So we slashed the time, but we are writing now to 5 nodes across multiple data centers. So that's just a heads up that yes, you are going to spend more time, and as you do more runs of this, of course, the data is very similar. So we're down to even 9.90 seconds here. So maybe about 1 second versus 0.16 second, and then of course, well, naturally the database on this one's much larger. You see 740,000 rows took 0.23 seconds to come back, but 60,000 rows took 0.08 seconds. So that's giving you an example of latency, so to speak, at work. How can you easy add a read-only node which can be used for statistics or something else? So what you're saying is you want possibly just a asynchronous replica. Unfortunately, through this interface, we don't have the ability for you to add asynchronous replica. We can add another node easily, but we can't add an asynchronous replica, and that's also has been a feature request. So besides asynchronous replica, we also want to definitely give you the ability not only to have asynchronous replica, but also to give you the ability to do load balancing. So we can configure Galera load balancer through the Galera Manager as well. So yeah, plenty of product enhancements. So I hope these questions get saved somehow, because we'll get back to you as soon as we can, because we're actively developing the software. And as I said, we are we're not only are we actively developing the software, we actually do this daily. And so like today there was already a push to make the API keys function with the new DigitalOcean API keys. So yeah, wow, cannot wait. Thank you. Yes. So please, try using this. If you have any questions, of course, you can shoot me an email here. And no, we're very happy to have all of you here. And the other thing that we can do is we can also if we want to actually just delete this cluster, which I can do later. But yeah, basically even if I decide to delete a node right here, and I'll just hold and release to confirm as we actually probably have gone over time. I apologize again because DigitalOcean is maybe not as fast as I expected it to be today, but good that we also had slides to go back to. So I've actually deleted nodes. I don't need this one here because that's the SF one. So as you can see, we only have 2 nodes, and there is data as you recollect, right? So 60,000 rows. So it's extremely simple for me to now also just add a node into the cluster. I just want to add 1 node, and I'm just going to call it Galera. Join the same segment, and basically hit the deploy button. And it'll start the deployment, and before you know it, I mean, it takes some time, but before you know it, we'll have a 3-node cluster back again, and with the data as well, because you've got the other 2 nodes to give it the data. So this deployment, as you know, will take approximately 5 to 10 minutes. So and we're obviously out of time, but we are going to post a blog. I don't know if the part where we are over 100% cheaper than DigitalOcean interests you. That's the thing that interests you. Please send us some feedback as soon as we end this webinar. So again, thank you for listening. I'm probably going to figure out how to stop the recording because I've not done this in a while. So thank you. Feel free to send email and try Galera Manager. Thank you for listening. And if you want to see this again, we're doing this in a few hours in the North American time zone, so you can join us again.